And welcome to the One More Thing podcast. Today I'm joined with Dr. Larry Baucom. How you doing?
Doing great. Thanks for asking.
Well, we had a phenomenal series on worship, obviously something very close to my heart, and I loved your different angles of just, taking it away from just what we do on Sundays with the music time. But just to recap, week 1 was Christ is with us. Week 2, confession. Week 3, God meets us at our point of need. And then this final week was availability. So you asked the question, are we available?
Right.
And what does that mean as far as to you, as far as the availability? How do we become more available to God?
Well, I think that sometimes we're so caught up in the busy cycle that we miss our availability. We just don't have time to reflect on things. I had a call this week from a guy in prison, and he basically said, I was out, and before I went to prison, I really went to church, but I'm a really stronger Christ follower now than I ever was before. And I said, well, his name is George. I said, George, it's because you've never had this much time. So he's available for what? And I think he's at least available to talk to God more, listen to God more. And it's amazing how God can use us wherever we are in a variety of ways, but just having a heart of love and compassion for the world. And sometimes we get caught up in our busyness, cell phones, texting, emails. We're all connected now to social media in some measure, and I think it's just we can unplug a little bit. It helps us.
Right. So that actually leads perfectly into my next question. So, what are some of the ways that you try your best, some of the practices that you have for becoming more available to God?
I think that when I can have a time of reflection, it prioritizes my day.
Mm-hmm.
And when I do not have that, I can chase my tail all day long. And it's not, busyness is not a measure of success, even though those of us who are high achievers, type A personalities, we think, oh, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I got to tell you, I spent too many hours in those early hours of the day getting things done. And then when the day goes on, you do that, and, by 6 or 7 o'clock, it's exhausting. And I would love to tell you I've got it figured out. I do not. I mean, this teaching was to me, if it was to anyone else, is busyness is not the priority, but balance is.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when I realize, okay, I need to let that go, I need to put that back, I'm not going to do that, or I've chosen to just avoid that altogether, or delegate it to someone else who can handle it just as well.
Right.
And so it's a process.
Yeah.
And I've been working on it my entire life and still am.
That's understandably so. So one of the things that you had done within the sermon was you gave different prominent biblical characters and their response to God, which I'm going to try to not butcher this, but he nanny. Uh-huh. I think when you're he neigh like a horse, knee, that helped me. But it's so much more than just here am I. It is almost like this, I'm ready to go.
Right.
I'm here. What do you need me to do?
Right.
And I think that was super inspirational that all these major biblical characters kind of responded in the same way. And it's difficult. I'm reading this book right now called Grace in the Gray. It's by Mike Donahue, who used to be the lead singer of 10th Avenue North. And he's talking about handling conflict in a more loving and gracious way. When we disagree with others on everything from theology to politics to what we're going to have for dinner tonight, and how we handle that in a more gracious way. And I love that. But one of the sections that he kind of talks about is when we're agreeing with God 100% of the time, maybe we've created a God in our own image.
Right.
And so how do we handle this conflict? How do we handle it's something that's uncomfortable, but I feel like God is calling me to do.
Right. I think that's a good question, and I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a process that we go through,
mm-hmm.
and sometimes we learn by failure,
mm-hmm.
and this did not work well for me. Dr. Phil, how's that working for you? And it didn't work very well at all, so maybe I need to try this again. But I do agree that if you are agreeing with everything that God has in your life, if you're never being challenged, then maybe you've created a God in your own image, mm-hmm. and I don't think that's the way it is. I go back to those characters, You can start with Adam. He's in the garden. Adam, where are you? Here I am. Here I am. And Hineni can be here I am or here am I
mm-hmm.
or here, but it's not a roll call like in school, Larry, Rick, here. That's not it. It's the availability. I'm not just here, but I'm also open to whatever the next request for me is. And I think that's a powerful statement. But the gray area, I love I haven't read Mike's book, but I'd love to see it.
Yeah, you can borrow it after I'm done. It's really, really good. I mean, one of the things that like caught my eye was the subtitle, you know, a more loving and gracious way to disagree, which I think is something that we could all use a little bit of right now. But that was a really important part that really stuck out to me. And I think that is hard, right? Like deciphering, you know, is this God's voice? Is this God like telling me like this is something that I need to do? And I think there's different like litmus tests that we can hold that up against, you know?
I think that's true. And the Hineni, I found out in that research, I mean, it's kind of one of those things that comes to me in the night. I go, man, I wonder how many other places this here am I. So I went back and opened my Hebrew up and I began to look at the word, and I began to do, you know, where else is this word found? And I found these other locations. And I found it fascinating as a study, and I don't know, you know, there's nothing original, but I don't ever remember somebody studying Hineni, but I do know that's also a Jewish prayer, and there's a Jewish, you know, where are we? Hineni, you know, I'm here, here am I, send me, send me. When God calls, here am I, send me, and it's that song, voice of availability, which I think is strong for all of us. Yeah,
I mean, I know some people have heard this story, but you know, there was this time in your life that you were done being a pastor and just didn't really want to do it anymore. You were done with the church, and all of a sudden you felt like this calling that I need to start something.
And that was a Hineni experience.
Yeah. Could you tell us that story?
Yeah, it was after being a pastor for 17 years or so, and I pastored one of the fastest growing churches in South Florida in that denomination. But I got tired of the battle. Everything was a battle. If you decided to do anything progressive, you had to sell 10 people on a board, had to convince them that this was the right thing to do. And as a professional pastor, you go to school for 4 years of college to be a pastor, then 4 years of seminary, and then 7 years in a PhD program. It's a scholarship, but still, you come with more expertise about what it means, and you spend your whole life studying. You've been to conferences all over the country. San Diego, Orlando, San Francisco, Orlando, L.A. I mean, you go to these conferences, and you're with 60 guys all about pastoring, and you come back home, and there's 10 people on your board who are elected. They have absolutely no idea of what it means to pastor. They have no idea of any scholarly business application for that. Some of them are not high-level employees even, but they're your boss. And that's when I said, I'm done with this. I just cannot lead this way. Moses would have never led them out of Egypt if he'd had to go through this kind of committee structure. and that's why I left. But moved, sold my home here in Sarasota, took my kids out of school, which was painful. And it was about 25 years ago now. And moved to Tallahassee, where my cousin owned a big mobile home dealership, and I went into sales with the idea of buying half the dealership from him, and worked there for a while. Really made more money than I've ever made in those few months. But Easter came, and on Easter Sunday, I went to a Baptist church in the morning, like a community church start. Music was great, and I went to a Presbyterian church because the pastor could preach, but their music was terrible. So I went to 2 church services that day, which was not uncommon for me.
Okay.
And then the kids would only go to 1, but I'd go to 2. And I came home that afternoon. I thought, I don't really want to do the sales thing. And I began to have some quiet time. And in the quiet time, it was like, I don't know that I saw the Lord high and exalted and the whole train filled the temple, but I did have a moment to where I was broken and sobbed, and just a huge catharsis. And in that moment, it seemed to me that God was calling me to say, I will start a church with you. You be the minor partner. I'll be the major partner. Everything we do is going to be about trying to help people find God in that way.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I said, Hineni, I'm here. Send me. I want to be a minor partner in whatever God is doing. And that was the day that Suncoast was born. We'll celebrate that this summer for 25 years of existence. But that was an experience, and I think it was God sending me. But my favorite part of the Hineni, I don't know if you're going to ask this later, but Isaiah 58, where it comes through to where these people are in bondage. They're in exile. They've struggled for now maybe 10 or 20 years, and they long to go back home.
Yeah.
And I mean, in Isaiah in chapter 43, it talks about, I'm preparing a way for you in the wilderness. Handel's Messiah talks about this. The valleys and hills shall be brought low. Everything's about getting back to Jerusalem.
Right.
And he says, and when the promise is there, and the people are saying, we want to go. And then God all of a sudden says, well, if you do, he uses the term hineni. And what I had not seen before until this week, that God promises to be available to them. He promises, I will be the one that goes with you. In other words, he is sending himself
Right.
to do this task for them. And that full awareness that God has always been with me, he's always traveled with me, even in bondage, even in exile, even in the high health periods, low health periods, high heartbreak times, God is always there.
Yeah.
And that is the comfort for me that I stand up and say, that was a teaching that I needed to hear.
Yeah.
And a couple times I got emotional, and I didn't see it coming, but when it comes, you just
It happens.
take a deep breath and realize that God is working through you
Yeah.
in an amazing way. And I'm grateful
Yeah.
that to be in a place that loves me, to have a community that's non-toxic, a place where God is mentioned a lot. We accept whatever for our lives, but the most of all, we realize that he is with us and always has been and always will be. And it's not like we have to pray him in. It's we have to open our eyes and see that he's already there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know I speak for a lot of people that we're very thankful that you had that Hineni experience and followed through and stepped forward and started Suncoast, because there's a lot of people's lives that have been forever changed because of this place, and we're very thankful.
Yeah, and probably none more than mine, which I'm grateful.
Yeah, and I know that we were kind of joking on Monday that you kind of had a sermon and a half, so wanted to take the opportunity on one more thing, if there was anything else that you missed or was left out because of time restraints.
Well, we didn't even get into the New Testament.
Yeah.
I mean, how many places in the New Testament to where, there's going to come this Comforter, the Holy Spirit, and he's going to live with you and abide with you. And, Jesus, when he prays in John, I'm with you till the end of the world. And this whole concept of the Spirit of Christ being with us, it's this whole Hineni experience throughout the New Testament. Jesus embodied that God is with us, Emmanuel. So there's so many other places to go, but, it's better to stay in the lane of Isaiah,
Right.
and not get too far out. I mean, there's so many other examples. So that's why it was, you have so much time, less is more.
Yeah.
Stay with it, and I tried to do that the best I could.
No, save those verses for another sermon.
That's right. He may need to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I know we have a lot of stuff going on here at Suncoast, so I wanted to take this opportunity to promote anything that you'd like to promote, because, man, our event schedule here is very full this season.
Tomorrow night, Suncoast After Dark, and that's at 6:30, correct?
6:30, yep.
And that goes, it's just a very unplugged time of music and food in the Grand Hall. Then there's the event of the Hawkins Road Festival on the 11th, which is going to be, but even before that, though, this coming weekend is open house.
Yeah.
So we simply are sending a lot of advertising, invite people to check us out.
Yeah.
We don't put on a cantata when people show up. We put on our normal best that we can.
Right.
So open house is just challenging people to invite someone, and they need a challenge. So that's the 5th. Then the Saturday after that is the 11th, Hawkins Road Festival from 11 to about 4. And if you're listening to this and you want to volunteer, we could always use volunteers, but it's food trucks, vendors, the big bounce houses, things for kids. It is a fantastic 5 hours that we'll have on that Saturday, and it's a gift to the community to say, hey, come and chill out, enjoy some time away. And
it's always
do
a fun
family
time.
thing.
It really is.
And then we launch a new series on Sunday, on this coming Sunday, on relationships. So a lot of good things are happening.
Yeah, it's exciting. Well, Larry, thank you so much for being on the One More Thing. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.